All right, so I guess this is the first video. Welcome to Z for Now. As the name of this channel suggests, this is going to be a documentation of my personal journey. You know, where my thoughts are at, how they're evolving, and where I see myself for the next few years. I intend on doing this once a week, and hopefully we can stay consistent with it. Now, what inspired this channel? Over the past couple of years, I've really started to get curious about myself. You know, asking myself the question, who am I? What I stand for? What my values are? And where I see myself going. And the reason for that, I believe, is because we're heading into a time of massive transition. You know, with the evolution of AI, social media, the changing dynamics of relationships, the rise in mental health crisis that a lot of people are facing, I think now is the time to build a community, to get to know more about yourself, and to create a pathway on how you're going to navigate these challenging times that we're going to be faced with. And while I am documenting my growth, if there is anybody who comes across this channel and you agree or disagree with some of my thoughts, this is a great place to have a conversation. So welcome along. So a little bit about myself. I like to think of my life in two separate stages. So stage one was me growing up in India, which is my home. And stage two is where I find myself today, which is in Canada. Now, focusing on stage one, I came from a privileged background. My father, he served in the Indian military. What that meant is a lot of my day-to-day needs were taken care of. You know, somebody to make my bed, somebody to wash my clothes, you know, somebody to take care of my meals, somebody to take me from point A to point B. And with that environment, there was a lot of things that I also learned simultaneously. You had to learn about detachment, which was a challenge. Couldn't really make friends and get too close because you had to say goodbye to them very, very soon. It taught me about the importance of stability because you didn't have any, right? Within a few years, your entire sort of your surroundings would change really quickly. But there's a few great things that also happened. It taught you how to be resilient. It taught you how to improve your communication skills. You had to be really good at making friends really early because you'd get left behind otherwise. And it taught you a lot about adaptability. But the one thing I realized transitioning over to the second stage of my life, now that I look back at it, I moved to Canada about 5 years ago. And since moving to Canada, there was a thing that I started facing which was new to me, which was solitude. Back at home in India, you're always surrounded by people. You know, your friends, your family, someone in the house. That lifestyle, I believe, enabled me to focus more externally. You know, I had always looked for validation. You know, there's always someone guiding me about who I am, what I should do. But when I moved to Canada and I started experiencing solitude, I found that challenging. I felt uneasy. And I didn't understand what that meant at the start. And the more I thought about it, I started realizing that I don't really know who I am and what I stand for. I've always shaped my worldview based on what people told me, what I was guided, but I never took the time out to sit with myself and actually understand myself. And so that's where I found myself. And, you know, I started to work on that. I was like, okay, well, this isn't great. I've moved to Canada. I've had to start from scratch, you know, build my sort of base with finances, friendships again, learning how to live with roommates, learning how to cook. And these things in itself enabled me to start focusing on what I value. And so, like I mentioned, when I started feeling uneasy, I found it as a challenge. I was like, okay, we need to build a relationship with ourselves. We need to understand who we are. And some people might relate to this, but when you haven't actually exercised this in the past, it's a very difficult question to answer. You can't just sit one day and, ask yourself, who am I? And expect to get the answers. Because if you haven't built a relationship with yourself, if you haven't shown yourself that you keep promises to yourself, are you worth showing up for? Do you stay consistent with what you say? And so when I couldn't find the answers, I knew to start, with the basic things first. So when I moved into my home with my roommates, and I had to sort of be by myself, I started asking myself, I started looking around. It's like, what do I like? Instead of asking yourself this broad question, ask yourself the small things. What do I like? Okay, I like the idea of having a clean room. Okay, do you clean it every day? Do you make your bed every day consistently? And I started picking up these small things, and I started staying consistent with it. And when I started doing that aha moment happens at some point where you're like, okay, well, we stayed consistent. We've consistently, shaped your room up, cleaned it, organized your bed. What else can we do? And I was like, okay, well, I do like the idea of staying in shape. Back home, I used to play sports, so I was relatively in shape. But now that I moved to Canada, I knew those opportunities to play sports wasn't there that often. So I had to, think of an idea of how I can stay in shape. So I was like, okay, let's go to the gym. Let's stay consistent with it. And I decided to, despite the challenges at the start, decided to stay consistent with it 4 days a week. And it's been about 3 years now. And sort of when I started, practicing some consistency and building routines in my life, I started realizing that there is a lot of potential that you can extract when you start building a relationship with yourself. When you start showing yourself that you can do something, when you put your mind to it and you will stay consistent with it, that allows you to put yourself in a situation where you can potentially find the answer of who you really are. So by introducing these level of consistencies in my life, these small routines, I believe I'm in a position where I've set up a foundation to know more about myself. And even though I don't have those answers yet, I think we're on the right path. And so if there's anything you want to take away from this video, you're curious about yourself, I suggest start from the small things. Start showing up for yourself more often. I'll see you guys in the next one.